What's up, everybody? Welcome to Generally Engineered. My name is Jacob, and today we're starting a very exciting part of our videos. This is our first Let's Design video. So this is where we take a peek back behind the curtain and look at some of the things that we're building and how we've arrived at those different designs. So beyond just building it and how to build it and what we're using, but how did we get to this point? Why are we doing what we're doing, and why is everything going where it's going? I want to look very closely at the designs we have, so hopefully you can have a better idea of designing things for yourself, getting inspiration, or pointing out my mistakes, or improving on our designs. So this is a very important part of Arch Vision for our channel, and it's really exciting. So today we're going to be talking about the truck bed LED system. So this is a design for my truck. I got a new truck, and I got a new top for that truck. And it's a little dark back there, especially at night. So if you're out camping, a little bit of light back there in the bed would be very beneficial. So to overcome that, I am designing an LED system to go in that truck bed. Now, I've made a couple of upfront decisions that we're going to begin this whole exercise with. So first, I want to use LEDs. So we're not going to shop around too much. I just want to use cuttable strips. There are about 16-foot strips that a lot of people use for projects like this. I'm going to use a red color because I think that will really work well for the applications that I have, whether it's camping, outdoor stuff. That will be very beneficial and won't be blinding. So I think the red will work very well there. And I'm also decided that I don't want to wire directly into my starter battery. So if I was wiring this whole system into the starter battery, then you would have issues with the truck would have to be on whenever you wanted to turn on your bed light, which is not exactly how I see myself using it. To have to go into the truck and turn it on, and then turn on the LED system, wouldn't be feasible for me. I want to be able to flick it on whenever I need to. So it will always be hot, but the risk there is wiring it into the starter battery is that you could leave the wrong switch on and it would completely drain your starter battery and then you're stranded. So that's what we're avoiding there. So I want to keep this electrical system entirely separate from the starter battery. And then we'll charge it off of the starter battery when the truck is running, but we'll have to do a little bit of a workaround with that, and we'll talk a little bit about that whole aspect later. But those are the two big things that I'm carrying in here to begin with. All right, so here's our system. Very simple. This is really one of the simplest electrical circuits that you can have. It's just a battery connected to a light with a switch to turn it on and off. These LEDs act just like a little light bulb you would use in maybe a high school physics class. The 12 volts is a little more serious than you might use there, but the principle is the same. It's very simple. It's really just a circuit with a switch. So we know the power, how much power and how much voltage those lights require, since I've picked them out on Amazon and they're all pretty much the same. So we know all that stuff. We're going to kind of add to this basic system and add all the different features that I want to see on this system. But keep in mind that this is really essentially, at its most basic form, what we're looking at. And for a lot of designs, it's really beneficial for me to try to work from a very simple place, a very simple system where I can understand everything that's happening. And if you can't understand the underlying levels of a system, it's hard to understand the whole thing. So the first thing that is really missing from this in a practical sense is a fuse. We need a fuse for safety to make sure that the battery doesn't blow up if there's a short circuit or anything. The fuse will break the circuit if it sees a current higher than its rating. So the fuse will make sure that the current never really exceeds a value that we want to see. So if something happens, it'll break the circuit and end that flow of electricity. That's the job of the fuse. Very important when we're dealing with something like this. Also, I'm going to break this out a little bit here. You see the LEDs have been split into two different LED groups. There are going to be side LEDs around the side of the bed, directly connected to the bed. And then there will be one set of LEDs on the roof. So I got the new top, and it's a removable thing, so I can take that off very easily. And I want to make sure that the roof LEDs attached to it can also be removed easily. So we're going to use a connector there, some kind of waterproof detachable connectors. There's a lot of them out there that we can use. So there's a lot of different options, and they're not too expensive, so that'll be a perfect solution. And that makes it very easy to unplug it and plug it in. And we're going to add that to the side LEDs too, not because you expect to move them around a lot, but in case something happens, you could easily take apart those side LEDs, and it helps kind of future-proof the design a little bit. Also, I want to add a voltmeter here into the power system. Whenever that switch is on, that would let the voltmeter turn on, and then it will give us a it'll let us monitor the battery while the LEDs are on. So that's also very helpful. You can kind of see when you start to see a voltage drop on that battery, it's time to recharge it. And the way we've done it this way, really simplifies the circuit. So you can put the voltmeter after the switch, and the voltmeter will only be on after that switch. Originally, I had a 12-volt DC jack coming out of this, and I opted against it because that's really not the purpose of this system, and it added a little bit of unnecessary complexity because you would have to wire the voltmeter differently to get a voltage reading whenever either of those was on. So this simplifies the circuit a little bit, and then you don't have to worry about people plugging things into it and draining the battery from not running the LEDs. It gives us a little bit more control. If we did want to add a 12-volt power jack in at some point, it's very easy to do. But right now, I don't think it's the right move. But we will leave space for it in the housing when we do that. But that was a decision I made to kind of simplify things and make it real easy for us to use the voltmeter with that switch. Also, charging is one of the more ambiguous parts of this whole thing. There's a lot of different ways you could charge this battery. You could charge it from a station in your house or an outlet from your house. You could do that. Or you could charge it, you could wire it into the starter battery. And there are a lot of different ways that you can kind of isolate it from that battery to stop it from draining the battery when the car isn't on. You could make sure that it's hooked into a power line that is only activated when the car is in accessory mode or started. But I don't even want to mess with any of that, so we're going to do kind of a quick and dirty approach. I'm going to run a 12-volt car cigarette lighter input, one of those two. I'm going to run a 12-volt thing into the cab and just plug it in when I need to charge it. It'll be a little slower, it won't be as direct, but you will not have to worry about it running down the battery. So good, because it will only go when the car is in motion, or it's when it's in accessory mode, but I don't really sit with it in accessory mode very often. So that's how we're going to do it. It's kind of a quick and dirty approach, but I think it's right for us now. If we want to devise something a little bit more elaborate, elegant for the charging system later, we can, but right now I just kind of want something that's functional, and I think we'll be able to get enough life out of the battery so that I won't have to drive around with it like that very often. I won't have to charge the battery very often, is the idea. We'll see how that actually works out after a little bit of use, but that's the theory behind it. So that's kind of how I'm going to go attack the charging system, and we'll factor that in going forward, but there are many more ways to get creative in that space if you so choose. So as you can see, this works out to be a pretty neat design problem. As someone who works on automotive stuff in my school work, this was beautifully simple. You have two main things that we're playing with: the lengths of the LED strips and the power of the battery that we choose. The lengths we are completely controlling. That's however many feet of LEDs we use, and the power of the battery will generally be determined by the length of LED strip. Ideally, I want to use the shortest length, the fewest LEDs possible to reduce the current draw, and that lets us run the battery for longer and run the system for longer without recharging, and a smaller battery will also recharge quicker. However, we also want to make sure that there's enough light in the system for it to be effective, so that'll require a little bit of testing, but this kind of two-parameter thing is very nice and very easy and can be captured very easily in a simple spreadsheet. So here we have this trade-off very nicely and neatly organized. Very simple, big L, big length of LEDs. You're going to have more light, but you need more power to power those lights for any given time. Your small L will give you a longer runtime, lower power requirement, but you're not going to get as much light. I think we're going to fall somewhere on the right-hand side of this little bar, considering I don't need this to be super flashy. I just need something to illuminate my bed a little bit so I can see things when I'm rummaging around. I've also kind of decided that I want about 5 hours of runtime from this system. That would be ideal, that's kind of my minimum, and anything more than that is awesome, but 5 hours would be perfect because I don't anticipate having it on for more than an hour at a time at any point, really. So 5 hours of continual runtime, in an ideal sense, of course, would be perfectly fine for me, and I think that's a reasonable amount of power to expect, of longevity to expect from a system like this. So to choose that battery and to manage that trade-off, I've made a pretty simple Excel sheet based off of this. The amp hour is how a lot of batteries are spec'd. It's basically a stand-in for the amount of energy that the battery holds. So that tells you how many amps the battery can provide for how many hours. So a 5 amp hour battery, that basically means the battery can provide 5 hours of 1 amp current, or it can give you 5 amps of current for 1 hour. Either way, but both of those work out to be effectively the energy that that battery has and how much current that a battery can provide. So what I'm really interested in here is the operational time. How long can we run the system? And it boils down to a pretty simple equation, as you see here, if you're interested in that. There'll also be a spreadsheet that I am going to pull up here. And that spreadsheet is very simple, very easy to use, and you can play around with the different LED lengths and get that operational time. Now, obviously, that operational time is probably the best you're going to do. It's a theoretical value, so you should probably overshoot on the operational time because your actual battery will be subject to a lot of environmental conditions that your theoretical one isn't, and I would expect that we would get less operational time than we would calculate here. So I'm going to plan to overshoot a little bit to account for any error and over time degradation of the battery itself. So the last main thing for us to think about here is the actual housing. So this is where we're going to keep all of the switches and batteries and things like that. On the battery size, I am opting to go with a marine battery box. They make these things for boats and for cars and things like that. So I'm just going to go with an off-the-shelf battery box. To hold the battery, it'll be designed for a sealed lead-acid battery, so you're not worried about any toxic gases or anything like that building up in the box. That can be a concern when you're dealing with charging these kinds of batteries. So I'm going to go with a specially designed one for the battery, just out of safety, because I don't know all that much about how it all works. So one day maybe we'll tackle that challenge, but today is not that day. And then we can also use, that means we can use a smaller box for the actual control panel. It would be nice to have everything kind of locked into the same area, but for now that'll be fine. And then I'm going to also oversize that control box a little bit so that if we do want to go on and add a 12 volt DC jack there or some more switches for some other electronic functionality back there, that would be where that would go. So I want to have a little bit of expandability built into the system so I don't have to go out and buy another box. So we'll figure that out, but we don't have all that many components in there. It's just a switch and a voltmeter right now, so it should be pretty easy to find a nice waterproof box there for those components, and that will bolt right onto the truck bed. Alright, well that about does it for this episode of Let's Design here. I hope that it gives a little bit of insight into how I've thought through this whole process and some of the things that I want. It's not the most complex problem, I don't think, but it's a good kind of starting off point for us as we kind of explore this area of design here. So I'm really excited about this project. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to getting all of it in. And then we will have a build video in a little bit as I go through some of the things I see, any changes I have to make during the build. But this will always be here so that people who are interested in that build video, which will be a little more condensed, can come here, get a little bit more information about some of the thought process and some of the different choices and why they were made. Because I think that will be really helpful for people who want to make this system their own and figure out exactly what kind of system works for them. And that's a big part of our channel, is opening people's eyes up to this and helping people collaborate and figure out really cool solutions to new problems. So if you have any input, if you have any feedback, if you like the format, don't like the format, have any suggestions for what would be good to see, send it in the comments below. Otherwise, feel free to leave a like or subscribe if you are interested in some of the things we're doing. We really appreciate any of the support at this early stage. And yeah, we're really looking forward to getting into this project and hopefully getting a lot more content out here in the coming weeks. So thank you all for watching. I've been Jacob, and keep building.